Genesis 1:11 through 13, the creation of plants. And God said, Let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind upon the earth. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning, a third day. Overview. Since plants are different in species from earth and water, they are created separately from these elements. Augustine. God's command, let the earth bring forth vegetation, became a law of nature and remained in the earth. Basil. The earth did not of itself produce plants that were hidden primordially in its womb. Rather, plants were created through the word. Basil. Although the grasses and the trees were only a moment old at their creation, they appeared as if they were months and years old. They were created as food for the animals and for Adam and his descendants. Ephraim. Poisonous and thorny plants were created after the original sin. Augustine. In the beginning, the fruits, grains, and vegetables were ripened by the Creator, not by the sun, which of itself is not to be worshipped. Basil, Ambrose, Chrysostom. The grain came from the ear, not the ear from the grain. Gregory of Nyssa. 1:11 Creation of plants and trees. Plants created separately from earth and water. Augustine. Here we must note the plan of the ruler of the world, since the crops and trees created are different in species from earth and water, and so cannot be counted among the elements. The decree by which they are to proceed from the earth is given separately, and the customary phrases describing their creation are put down separately. Thus Scripture says, and so it was done. And then there is a repetition of what was done. There is separate mention also of the fact that God saw that it was good. But since these creatures cling fast to the earth and are joined to it by their roots, God wished them also to belong to the same day of creation. The germination of the earth. Basil the Great. After the earth, rid of the weight of the water, had rested, the command had come to it to bring forth first of the herbs, then the trees. And this we will see still happening even at the present time, for the voice that was then heard and the first command became, as it were, a law of nature and remained in the earth, giving it the power to produce and bear fruit for all succeeding time. Plants created through the word. Basil the Great. When the earth had heard, let bring forth vegetation and the fruit trees, it did not produce plants that it had hidden in it, nor did it send up to the surface the palm or the oak or the cypress that had been hidden somewhere down below in its womb. On the contrary, it is the divine word that is the origin of things made. The miracle of vegetation. Basil the Great. Let the earth bring forth herbs, and in the briefest moment of time the earth, beginning with germination, in order that it might keep the laws of the Creator, passing through every form of increase, immediately brought the shoots to perfection. The meadows were deep with the abundant grass, the fertile plains, rippling with standing crops, presented the picture of a swelling sea with its moving heads of grain, and every herb and every kind of vegetable and whatever shrubs and legumes there were arose from the earth at that time in all profusion. 1:12 Bringing forth vegetation. From the ear came the grain. Gregory of Nyssa. In the beginning, we see, it was not an ear rising from a grain, but a grain coming from an ear, and after that the ear grows round the grain. Do not worship the sun. Basil the Great. The adornment of the earth is older than the sun, that those who have been misled may cease worshipping the sun as the origin of life. The fruits were ripened by the Creator. Chrysostom. Hence Scripture shows you everything completed before the creation of this body, the sun, lest you attribute the production of the crops to it instead of to the Creator of all things. The sun did not create vegetation. Ambrose. Let everyone be informed that the sun is not the author of vegetation. How can the sun give the faculty of life to growing plants when these have already been brought forth by the life-giving creative power of God before the sun entered into such a life as this? The sun is younger than the green shoot, younger than the green plant. How the plants appeared. Ephraim the Syrian. Although the grasses were only a moment old at their creation, they appeared as if they were months old. Likewise, the trees, although only a day old when they sprouted forth, were nevertheless like trees, years old, as they were fully grown and fruits were already budding on their branches. The grass that would be required as food for the animals that were to be created 2 days later was thus made ready, and the new corn that would be food for Adam and his descendants, who would be thrown out of paradise 4 days later, was thus prepared. The poisonous and thorny plants. Augustine. The Manichaeans are accustomed to say, if God commanded that the edible plants and the fruit trees come forth from the earth, who commanded that there come forth so many thorny or poisonous plants that are useless for food, and so many trees that bear no fruit? We should say then that the earth was cursed by reason of the sin of man, so that it bears thorns, not that it should suffer punishment, since it is without sensation, but that it should always set before the eyes of man the judgment upon human sin. Thus men might be admonished by it to turn away from sins and to turn to God's commandments. Poisonous plants were created as a punishment or as a trial for mortals. All this is the result of sin. The earth put forth vegetation, Basil the Great. At this saying all the dense woods appeared, all the trees shot up, likewise all the shrubs were immediately thick with leaf and bushy, and the so-called garland plants all came into existence in a moment of time, although they were not previously on the earth. Let the earth bring forth. This brief command was immediately a mighty nature and an elaborate system which brought to perfection more swiftly than our thought the countless properties of plants. Vegetation not a symbol, Basil the Great. When I hear grass, I think of grass, and in the same manner I understand everything as it is said, a plant, a fish, a wild animal, and an ox. Indeed, I am not ashamed of the gospel. Some have attempted by false arguments and allegorical interpretations to bestow on the scripture a dignity of their own imagining. But theirs is the attitude of one who considers himself wiser than the revelations of the Spirit and introduces his own ideas in pretense of an explanation. Therefore let it be understood as it has been written, God, not the sun, created day. John Chrysostom. He created the sun on the fourth day, lest you think it is the cause of the day.